As you work with lists in Excel, it's not uncommon to want to rearrange the order of rows within a list. We call that sorting. And although there is a way to sort by columns, moving columns left and right, nearly always sort means let's rearrange the order of the rows based on what we see in one or more columns. As we look at this worksheet here, it's called sorting. It's in the workbook 10 Data Management Features. It appears to be sorted by either column H or J, descending order. We might want to rearrange it by department. Anytime you're about to sort a list, if there's other data on the same worksheet, and I do have data off to the right, I need it there. Perhaps I've got more way off to the right too. I need that there, but I certainly don't want to sort it along with the other rows. So before sorting a list, always make sure that your list is delineated by at least an empty column on the right. And if there happens to be data below it, make sure you've got a few empty rows separating that data as well. When we're ready to sort, we can highlight the data. Or if we know that we have no empty rows or columns within it, we can just click within the data and start using the sort commands. It's not a bad idea, particularly if you haven't seen the data in a while or someone else sent it to you. Click within the data, press Control A, think of A for all, then press Control period a few times. This will simply move the active cell around the corners of the range. What you don't want to have happen is to end up sorting and then realize that only some of your data got sorted. We go down to the bottom here, keep pressing Control period. And again, you don't have to do that very often, just a quick reminder. Okay, we're ready to sort. We can keep the data highlighted or click within it. On the Home tab, you will see Sort and Filter. You can click there and then go into Custom Sort, or you can go to the Data tab and use the larger of the sort buttons right here. Sort. This doesn't say Custom Sort, but it means the same thing. Two small buttons here we'll get to in a minute. Sort. Excel highlights the data, and if there's a header row, Excel nearly always figures it out. If that's the case, you want to make sure this box is checked. We don't want row 1 treated like all the others. Rare times would you not have a header, and of course this should be unchecked. We can sort on the basis of what's in 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns. Older versions of sort only let us work on the basis of 3. We can now go as high as 64. We want our major grouping here, let's say by department. So sort by, click the drop arrow, it shows our field names, department. Now, in some departments, there are going to be a lot of people there. So as we're looking at that department, we might want to add level. Let's sort by status. And we might even, in some departments, have a lot of people with the same status and same department, so we could add another level, maybe even another level. If it's a text field, you probably want these to be in alphabetical order. If it's a numeric field, say that third level in, we might want this to be by years. Consider whether you want it to be smallest to largest or largest to smallest. Maybe we'll have a fourth level here by employee name. Sorting is very fast. Click OK. Sometimes it seems practically instantaneous. We're about to see a new list, sorted by department, within each department, in order by status, within that by years, within that by employee name. And there it is. Here are a bunch of contract people, account management. Here are the full-time people. Quite a few of them here. Full-time people, account management. Notice that in column F, although we're not seeing the heading, that's years of service. So they're in order by years of service. And in this group right here, they have the same status, years of service, department. They're in order alphabetical. You quickly get the feel of what sorting does for you. It simply moves rows up and down nearly all the time. At a later time, if you simply wanted to resort this list by employee name, you could click somewhere in column A, click the simple AZ button right here. Going to rearrange the entire list by employee name. Now, if the next sort you do, either immediately or a few hours or days later, if we click in column C and then choose AZ, we're now rearranging the data based on what's in column C. But Excel does remember that right now it's in order by employee name. So now within each department, it's in order by employee name. And if at a later time I come back and click in column D, I'm going to sort by status. Excel remembers the previous orders. So sometimes when you're sorting on multiple levels, if you remember that the last sort always overrides but remembers the previous order, you can even use these buttons in succession as you get more comfortable with sorting. Also, from time to time, there are special options in here. You can sort on cell color. We don't have any on the screen here, or by font color. Or if you're familiar with conditional formatting icons, you can sort on that basis as well too. If there is that occasional but rare need to sort by moving columns left and right, you'll jump into options and you'll see that choice, sort left to right. So sorting is generally foolproof, fast, relatively easy, and it's absolutely indispensable as you work with large lists of data. Anytime you'd like to hide rows within a list and focus on just the rows of most importance for the moment, you can use a feature called filter. It's widely used and generally pretty straightforward and easy. So we've got a list here on the worksheet called filter. It's got about 700 rows or so in the workbook 10 data management features. The filter option is found on the right side of the Home tab under Sort Filter. You could start there. There it is, Filter. Or on the Data tab. Now, before doing this, you want to make sure that the list you're working with has no empty rows or columns within it. Click anywhere within the list, activate Filter. We see filter arrows at the top of each column. I'm only interested in seeing the full-time people here. I'll click the arrow for status. This is a text field. Notice that as we slide down, we see the term text filters, and you possibly could imagine using some of these at different times. In the example here, all we want to do is make sure that only full-time has a check on it. How about unselecting all? Click full-time, click OK. Lower left corner tells us 393 of 741 records found. Now, sometimes you'll do filtering on multiple columns. Of all these full-time people here, let's say we only want to focus on those who have a job rating of 5. Column I, now that's a number filter. At different times, we could consider using some of these, but let's say in this case, all we care about, unselect all, 5. Okay, there we are. Only 92 records. And not that we have to narrow it further, but along with this, we could say, let's see out of all these people here, how many of our full-time people with a job rating of 5 have been here over 10 years? Number filters. Greater than or equal to, and of course there is a difference. How about 10 or more? If we say greater than or equal to, that's going to be 10 or more. There we are. And that list is down to 39. At any given time, when you see a list like this, if you were to copy and paste this, Excel would only pick up the visible data. So right now, if I were to copy and go to a different worksheet and paste, this is the only data we would see. At different times, you no longer want the list to be filtered, but yet you want to keep the filter arrows. The button just to the right is clear. If we're working across a date field like column E, here as we click the drop arrow, we see the term date filters. Imagine if this were historical data of a transaction type nature, we might want to view yesterday's data, last week's data, last month, last quarter, last year. If it's predictive data, we can go in the opposite direction. And all the way down at the bottom, all the dates in the period. So if we want to make a little list here of all the people having an anniversary month in October, we'd choose October, and here are all the people hired in October. I think you could imagine using a field like this too in other kinds of scenarios with other kinds of data. So all of our October data is visible, 58 out of 741 records. So it's a relatively easy feature to use. If we no longer want filtering at all for the moment, we'll simply click Filter, and any filtering that's in place immediately disappears, as does those filter arrows at the top of each column. So at different times, we want to hide the rows we don't want to see. The filter feature gets us there quickly. One of Excel's most powerful analytical tools is what we call a pivot table. It's a great tool for creating quick summary totals based on a list of data. And on this worksheet here called Pivot Table Data, in the workbook 10 Data Management Features, we've got a list of about 900 rows. It's not sorted, as it often might be. It doesn't need to be to create a pivot table. A list like this should have no empty rows or columns within it. What we'd like to be able to do is to come up with some good quick summary information here. So off to the right, I've done this manually ahead of time with the kind of list you could imagine wanting to get. It's a list of all the salespersons here. They can sell products to any region, so we see how that's broken out by region. And how do we get to something like this? Here's a formula here in cell J4. I'll double click it. Not the most difficult of formulas, but on the other hand, it's going to take you some time to come up with answers like this and verify them. And we wouldn't have a lot of flexibility here if we had to quickly turn this around and put in another field up here, for example, product or customer instead of this. We can create a list like this with a pivot table in about 5 or 10 seconds without formulas. And that's what we're going to do. Check out the list ahead of time. You make sure there are no empty rows or columns. You need only click within the list. And although it is a data management-like tool in one respect, it's not found on the Data tab. It's on the Insert tab. Let's click Pivot Table. Excel nearly always gets it right. It figures out the extent of the data. We could put this on the same worksheet, but more likely, let's go with the default setting here, New Worksheet. Many times you'll just glance, click OK. We're on a new sheet. Off to the right is the all-important pivot table fields list. It shows those same column headings as we saw before. We can make this wider and narrower. A couple of clicks and a drag, and we will have a pivot table. I'm going to click the box for salesperson. Note the left-hand side of the screen. That's a unique and alphabetized list of our salespersons. I'll zoom in a bit using the slider bar, bottom right of our screen. I'm going to click the box for items. Watch those numbers over there. And I'll drag the word region into the columns area. That's it. Now, you might have noticed before, and I'll point out our best salesperson, Willie Lohman, right there. Grand total, 8111. Not a formula in sight. Let's jump back to the source data. One sheet to the right. There are those same numbers out there. There's Willie Lohman, 1073, grand total, 8111. We got here pretty fast. Not quite right, maybe with these. Nothing wrong with those, but notice something else. When the active cell is within the pivot table, we've got a new ribbon, Pivot Table Tools, with a contextual Analyze tab and a Design tab. Now, you wouldn't know instinctively what to do here, but on the Design tab, Report Layout, Compact is the default. If we choose Outline or Tabular, we'll see the actual field names there. I think most people would probably want that, so salesperson, region, looking good. And if we were making a presentation, you could imagine somebody in the audience might say something like, okay, we see the breakout by region. How about by product? And what do? In the pivot table field list to the right, we'll uncheck the box for region and drag the word product into this area called columns. Now you quickly start beginning to see how the lower portion of this pivot table fields list is like a mapping of the pivot table. We've got products here across these column headings. Salespersons are in rows. So we see the term rows, columns out here. And no time are we seeing any formulas. And not only can our comparison be just between two fields here, product and salesperson, we could bring region back here. I'll put it in the rows area. Watch the screen down the left-hand side. And I'll zoom back again with that slider bar a bit. You see what's happening. Now that's maybe contrary to what a lot of people envision as a pivot table. Usually it's compact, give me the big picture sort of thing. But in some cases, this would be appropriate. We can make some other changes. Here's a design tab. Off to the left are subtotals. We might not want to show those. Or maybe we'll just move these fields around in different ways, making all kinds of different comparisons. Maybe if we compare or change the order of this, drag salesperson below region, we see a different layout that way. So there are just so many different ways to view the data. We never worry as we do this too about disrupting or threatening our source data. And one little oddity that you get used to, at least initially, is this idea. If we do make changes to the source data, the pivot table does not adjust automatically. You go to the Analyze tab and refresh the data, or use that keystroke shortcut, Alt F5. So that's something to keep an eye on. But it's an amazingly powerful tool. It gets us here quickly. We create these summary lists. We manipulate the data in a variety of ways. It's just indispensable for any kind of situation where you're trying to analyze data from a list. In Excel, the term data type might refer to the idea that a cell or a group of cells contain text or they contain numbers. But in 2019, Excel introduced a new feature called a data type. And at that time, there were only two data types, stocks and geography. But a new concept was introduced along with those data types, the idea of pulling in information from the internet, real-time data that could be refreshed. Stocks and geography has been expanded, and there are now preview data types available. We see them in the green panel here, and if you're an Office Insider, you can go to the Data tab and see these options available here. Now, a couple of examples will give us some insight into how this feature works. I've got data in column A. I want to pull in some nutritional information. So one approach certainly is to jump out to the internet, copy some data, say out of Wikipedia, come back here, paste it. But you know how cumbersome that can be? And is it up to date? That's another concern. And did I find all the information I wanted? Let's do this a little bit differently by first taking this data here and converting it into what's called a table. Not everybody works with this feature, but anytime you are working with lists, I think it's advantageous to convert the list into a table to get not only additional formatting capabilities, but also data handling efficiencies. So selecting this data over in column A, I'm envisioning a list here that's going to grow. I want to pull in some nutritional information. So after selecting the data, I'll press Control T, click OK, The data is now a table. This is not a prerequisite for using the new feature, but I do recommend it. Now, going to the Data tab in the ribbon, off to the right in the category called Data Types, we've got a drop arrow here. And in this case, the category is Food. Click it. And what are we doing? We're pulling in information from the internet. I can click on this cell for Apple right here, and clicking the actual icon, there is some information about an apple. And I can expand that greatly category by category. But what I really want to do here is to pull in some information, let's say, about calories. Here's a button. It's the quick analysis button. I'll click it. Here's lots of information. I'm interested in total calories. Click it. There it is. I'll do this again. And for the next column, I want carbohydrates. That's pulled in. At a later time, I might want to add another fruit. So I'll put in pear. As I press enter, the same sort of thing is going to happen here. Slight pause while Excel pulls in the data. Now, the information that we saw that was available out there is actually being stored in each of these cells in column A. And it can be refreshed. We can right click, there's data type, we can refresh it. We could convert it back to text if we wanted to. But in some cases, in some categories here, we can even pull in pictures and maps. I've got some data in column E, same general idea here too. I'll click within the data, convert it to a table, Control T, OK. Excel picks up all the contiguous data. I'll change the color for readability purposes up there. And once again, going to the Data tab, this time clicking the drop arrow, I'll choose Location. Convert to a location. This will take a bit longer. We will see a particular icon associated with each city. And again, the ability to pull in information. And there it is. I'm clicking the Quick Analysis button again. I want to get city population. There it is. I'm also interested in additional features. Another way to use this is by way of a formula. So I can type equal. I'll click over on New York City here, and we see the information listed this way. How about median household income? Double click, enter. And because it's a table, the data is pulled in more efficiently. And off to the right, we see other categories as well. Universities, mountains, movies. You can imagine others. And on a different worksheet here called Future Data Types, here are some of the additional data types that we will be seeing soon. If you are interested in the ability to get to these features, going back to that first worksheet here, go to insider.office.com. Now, there's another capability here that's pretty incredible, and that's the ability to set up data types using our own data. So on a different worksheet here called Employees List, here's a list that I need frequently. It's got many, many columns, nearly 750 rows. And I often need this data, but many times I don't need all of it. So what I've done ahead of time, and I'll give you just a brief overview, I've used a feature called Power Query. That's well beyond the scope of this course. I could have also used a feature called Power BI. That's a business analytics service from Microsoft. So selecting this data, earlier I went to Get and Transform on the Data tab and used the option called From Table Range. And this took me into the Power Query Editor, and there's an option there called Create Data Type. I did that ahead of time, and it was rather straightforward. So it's available, and here on the next worksheet is an example of having pulled in that data. I used an option here called Queries and Connections. I simply pulled in the column entry here. And here's an option by way of that Quick Analysis button, the same kind of information that we saw earlier. I simply want to show the compensation here and the status for the moment. That's all I need for now. At a later time, I might want to use this on a different worksheet or expand it in different ways by adding additional columns. If you are interested in how Power Query works or Power BI, which is even more powerful, I recommend these courses available in the LinkedIn library, Excel Power Query, and Power BI Essential Training. And as we've seen, the data types not only available with our own data, shown here, but those earlier examples with fruit and city, you can imagine how the way we talk about data types is quite different now. And even though I didn't show you the example of map and pictures, those too can be data type elements pulled into the information. If I lost internet access right now, I still have all this data available and I can add additional columns. So this is a new way of working with data. And I think you can see that for many users who work with lists of data, this is a powerful addition, will change the way you work with Excel.